Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a judge halts President Obama's executive actions on immigration. And San Diego activists gathered quickly to protest the move. We'll tell you what comes next in the immigration debate.
Plus, fuel-efficient cars are good for the environment, but bad for banking gas tax revenues used to repair California roads. How a pilot program for a road usage charge may be the answer. But first, who's using the most and least amount of water during this historic drought? I'm Peggy Pico with Why It Matters just ahead.
And we take you behind the scenes of San Diego Opera's latest production, Don Giovanni. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. A big setback tonight for a federal program designed to save millions of immigrants from deportation. A federal judge in Texas blocked President Obama's new policy to grant legal status to nearly 4 million men and women who are living and working in the country illegally. Homeland Security has stopped preparing to expand the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, better known as DACA. The agency was expected to accept applications for the program tomorrow. San Diegans from faith, labor, and legal communities rallied quickly outside a Catholic church today, calling the latest efforts to block President Obama's actions on immigration just a bump in the road. Dozens of people gathered on the steps of Christ the King Church in Logan Heights, a community made up of mostly Latino, Black, and Asian working class folks. They held signs supporting the expansion of federal programs to provide temporary relief to immigrant family members threatened by deportation. Gloria Morales says delaying President Obama's plan doesn't make sense because the people are already here.
Everything that you buy, more likely it has been touched by somebody that don't have documents. If you go fast food, the vegetables, who takes care of you sick people, who takes care of you babies, we are working families.
26 states led by Texas are challenging the president's authority to protect young immigrants if they were brought to the U.S. illegally as children. Brenda Aguirre is one of them. Now 28, she's lived in San Diego since she was 4.
I'm keeping faith that there's going to be a solution, because I think there's a solution for everything.
The White House says it will appeal the ruling to block Obama's executive action, which was set to start taking effect tomorrow, leaving thousands of immigrants who call San Diego home wondering what happens next.
We're not here looking for something that to steal something. We're here because we are looking for the dream, the American dream, a possibility for a better life for ourselves and for our kids, for our families, for our community.
The group is calling on Congress to pass a real immigration reform bill that provides a permanent solution to keep families together. A Charger spokesman is questioning how independent a citizen stadium advisory group is from the mayor's office. Special counsel Mark Fabiani sent a letter to Kevin Faulkner questioning the role of the group's new spokesman. He says one played a key role in Faulkner's election and the other is connected to a group opposing the Chargers' preferred location for a new stadium. Fabiani told KPBS he just wants clarification on who's leading the group. Faulkner responded with a letter to the Chargers owner, Dean Spanos, expressing disappointment with Fabiani and saying everyone's time would be better spent creating a plan for a new stadium. West Coast ports are open again after stalled contract talks disrupted billions of dollars of international trade. The Secretary of Labor was in San Francisco today to help settle the contract negotiations. The talks affect about 20,000 dock workers, including those here in San Diego. Companies locked out dock workers over the holiday weekend, claiming they were slowing down to gain the upper hand in bargaining. Workers say that was not the case. A North County assemblyman has taken another step toward running for Barbara Boxer's U.S. Senate seat. Rocky Chavez is forming an exploratory committee and plans to start talking to fundraising groups. Chavez describes himself as a fiscal conservative and social moderate.
And I'm also one of the few that actually served on a legislative body as an assembly member on how to get things done bipartisanly across the aisle. I have a record in Sacramento of being pragmatic, getting things done. And I think we need that in D.C. We need people who are going to go there and work for the people of California and not work for some special interests.
State Attorney General Kamala Harris is the only official candidate for the Senate seat. If Chavez raises at least $5,000, he'll have to formally declare himself a candidate. The Pentagon has a new chief tonight. Ashton Carter was sworn in earlier today at the White House. He's President Obama's fourth Secretary of Defense, replacing Chuck Hagel, who resigned last year under pressure. Carter pledged to carefully consider decisions about sending troops into harm's way. The Pentagon is facing a series of challenges, from battling the so-called Islamic State militants, budget cuts, and strengthening the NATO alliance. Some cities here in the county conserve water better than others. Peggy Pico finds out who's saving the most water and how to improve conservation efforts.
Despite being one of the worst droughts on record, a new Equinox Center report finds most people in San Diego County used more water than they did in each of the previous 4 years. Joining me with some reasons why and recommendations to improve the region's water supply are my guest, Equinox Center Board Chairman Ray Ellis and Deputy Director of San Diego's Public Utilities Department, Marcy Steyer. And Ray, our current drought is so severe that any amount of rain we get, really, it's going to take a long time to get out of it. We're going to need a lot more just to get out of this. But your report examined water consumption rates over the last 4 years. Why do that type of analysis now?
Well, we think that if we can get this data in the hands of policymakers, the media, and consumers, that we can educate them on where we are. And at Equinox, we believe that if you measure something, then you can take corrective action to improve those numbers. And
your report is very detailed on these measurements, and you actually have this map that shows in red the highest residential water users compared to the lowest water consumers that are seen in green, and somewhere in between is residential water use in orange. Tell us more about what this data reveals to you.
Well, one of the things we did discover going through the process is that we've got to get a little better at clearly defining the various customer classes, and I think some of the information on the map needs to be taken a little bit with a grain of salt, because there could be a mixture in there of residential use and potential landscape and agricultural use, depending on what part of the county we're in. But if that's one of our key recommendations, is let's clean that up so that we've got comparable data, so we're comparing orange to orange each year.
But very clearly, Marcy, what we're seeing in this comparison is San Diego is one of the lowest average water consumer users. So in other words, using less water in the city of San Diego. So what's working in San Diego?
Well, I think we've had an established water conservation program for almost 25 years, and I think clearly it's a reflection on the commitment of city residential customers to heed the call of conserving less.
Now, the San Diego County Water Authority actually reported the region reduced its water use by 29% in December compared to the December of 2013. So let me start with you, Marcy. How much more would you like to see? We'll talk about the city of San Diego. How much more would you like to see consumers here conserve water?
Well, we are trying to heed Governor's call about reducing consumption because of this historic drought. But I think it's important to understand the December numbers are clearly a reflection on the rain that we received that month, and we're very lucky for that. And it's just easier to have lower consumption numbers when it's a wet month.
Sure, which we're not getting very many of. So let me address that same question to you, Ray. Do you think that these numbers will impact how much a consumer is really willing to conserve?
I think so, and that's one of the recommendations in the report as well, is that once we have the real clear, concise data in a consistent manner, let's communicate that messaging all the way from the state down to the local user, so that we're consistent messaging, so we don't have those situations where the consumer feels like, oh, okay, we're in a good spot now, so we can back up. This is a critical issue for our region and will be for decades to come.
Sure,
so we've got to stay after it.
Yeah, and energy companies do this, right, Marcy? So are you proposing that perhaps there's a way to get water consumers to be able to see how they're consuming water and how they compare to their neighbors?
Well, as a matter of fact, we are launching a new bill that our residential customers will see in their next billing cycle that explains just that. How are you doing this month versus how you did versus that month for last year, as well as for your neighborhood where your overall consumption is. So we think it's very visual. There's a lot of information. We think that will really help provide good information to our customers to help them out.
And Ray, this conservation, of course, is one, the starting point, but you also recommend some other things that this report could help with. What are those top 3 recommendations?
Well, the conservation still is number one, and that's where the low-hanging fruit is. When you look at water consumption, 50% is in the residential multifamily, and 60% of that, 60% is in that area, and 50% is in landscape. So we've got to continue to plant properly and use newest technology and tracking for that, because that's the key area. But again, the messaging is very important as well.
And I understand recycling and also our water supply, but folks can see all of that on our website, kpbs.org, and we have a link to this very informative report. Ray Ellis and Marcy Styler, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
If you see a car with a tall camera attached to its roof, it might not be collecting footage for Google Maps. San Diego is actually using the car to measure the damage on its roads. Mayor Faulkner says the 6-month study will help prioritize what roads should be fixed first.
It's going to help us make sure that we're spending our money wisely on the streets that need it and the streets that need immediate attention now.
The city is paying $550,000 to do the assessment. A report should be out in 8 or 9 months. Well, we are getting a better picture of just how many folks are signing up for health care this year under President Obama's Affordable Care Act. White House estimates more than 11 million people signed up during open enrollment. The final number could grow because the administration is giving folks who couldn't finish their applications some breathing room. There's now a new deadline set for this Sunday.
And our aim has always been to ensure every Californian that we can. That said, we did forecast, and we forecast that we would enroll 500,000 people. That was our midpoint estimate in this open enrollment period. Well, as of end of Sunday, we were at 474,000 people. It's huge. I'm very confident we're going to beat 500,000 as we help people get across the finish line.
The state's health care exchange covered California, set up more than 500 storefronts to help folks sign up. Right now, the only data available is on how many people have taken the steps towards enrolling. The cost at the gas pump continues to go up. AAA says the average for a gallon of regular is $2.83. That's up about 16 cents from a week ago, but still 95 cents less than this time last year. Should California ditch the gas tax and find a new way to pay for roads and repairs? Peggy Pico explains why state lawmakers are concerned and some possible alternatives.
Hybrids, electric, and fuel-efficient cars reduce gas consumption, but they also reduce revenue from California's gas tax, which is used to finance road maintenance and repairs. Sacramento noticed, and now there's a study underway to find out if a road usage charge is a better option than the state's gas tax. My guest, Jim Madaffer, with the California Transportation Commission and chair of California's Road Charge Advisory Committee, joins me with the details. And Jim, how would this road usage charge actually work?
Well, when it's finished, and if it does get implemented, it's something that the public wouldn't even notice, just like they don't notice the gas tax right now. And the idea would be is this replaces the gas tax. Gas tax goes away, and instead you just pay for the miles you drive on public roads.
So that's what's different. The gas tax right now is based on what, gallons of gas you use?
Right. Gas tax is very archaic, first put in the turn of the last century, and it basically worked great when cars were getting 8 to 10 miles to the gallon, and everybody pretty much paid the same. But with the fact that by 2025 you're going to see vehicles getting 54, 55 miles to the gallon, it means less and less money every day for our roads, and we've seen that with the way our bridges and highways are not being kept up with maintenance.
To help put this price point in context as far as the gas tax and how much revenue we're actually getting, your committee compared the average gas tax cost to a few other consumer costs like cable TV, cell phones, coffee habits, and internet feeds. How would a road usage charge affect the amount of we actually pay in gas taxes right now? You're saying it'll swap it out. That's the idea. We want to swap it out and also catch up with where it really ought to be. So there's no question. We aren't paying right now what it takes to maintain our roads. Last time it was raised 18 cents a gallon. If you factor in inflation and the higher mileage we're getting in vehicles today, it's really about only 7.5 cents. And so when you think about it, cars today getting better mileage, paying less to maintain our roads, and yet things cost more today than they did 20 years ago to fix. This includes bridges, includes highways, and there's a lot of newer issues such as environmental concerns, stormwater rules, lots of other regulations that weren't contemplated back when the tax was last raised. Sure, and as you mentioned, 1994, 18 cents a gallon, which is not really with inflation and all the things you mentioned, but why not just raise the gas tax? Because it's broken. It's archaic. It just doesn't work anymore. As I mentioned, as we continue to see more and more fuel-efficient vehicles, it's a no-win situation. What makes sense is to study this notion of paying for the miles you drive. So therefore, if you drive 10 miles, you pay for 10 miles. If you drive 1,000 miles, you pay for 1,000 miles. The fee, yeah. Not actually per mile, a per mile fee. Assembly Speaker Tony Atkins proposed this sort of stopgap plan because, as you mentioned, we're already in dire need of having road repairs that aren't being funded. And it's to get $10 billion of funding maintenance and repairs for California's road and bridges. Let's listen.
That would include $1 billion per year by returning truck weight fees to transportation instead of using them to repay GO debt. It includes $200 million per year for transportation funding by accelerating a repayment schedule for those transportation loans. And it includes a net of $800 million per year in new net funds for transportation by establishing a fee. A mileage fee, a road user fee, but it's a fee. So that fee that she's talking about is very similar to what you were talking about. How is it different, though? Well, what the Speaker is proposing is what I'll call bridge financing, if you will. It's stopgap. California's needs are into the billions of dollars. Her plan is $10 billion for 5 years. What we're studying is to replace, especially after that phases out after 5 years, is to replace the gas tax, and something that will go for the ages, that'll go long term. So people like myself who've been driving an electric car for a year and a half now pay nothing. We'll at least now be able to pay for what I cost to use the roads. I see. There's some concerns about this, of course, and one of them is privacy concerns. Absolutely. How would you monitor how much mileage somebody would be driving, and how is a person's privacy protected? Privacy is one of the very important things that we consider with the task force. And Senate Bill 1077, which implemented the task force, has some specific requirements that privacy must be maintained. To give you an example, as cars are getting more and more modern, telematics on vehicles now are constantly in communication with the internet and able to transmit data. In fact, the Air Resources Board is looking at maybe getting rid of smog checks for newer vehicles and just sending smog data to making sure the vehicles are kept up. Same kind of thing can happen where the vehicle knows the public roads it's driven on. Those are mileage clicks. Those are then transmitted. And then what you're basically deducted from your account, or whether it's in your registration or your insurance, you pay for the miles you drove. Sure, but those aren't all in place now. So while this pilot program gets started, what's the protection? Pilot program will involve all kinds of things, from just simply a paper log to smartphone apps that people that aren't as worried about time and place. But the key thing is to make sure that whatever data ultimately is collected does protect users from a privacy standpoint. So we will include that in our efforts. All right, Jim and Def, thank you so much. Thank you very much.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next news hour, child labor, toxic chemicals, all in the pursuit of gold. That's Tuesday on the PBS NewsHour.
San Diego Opera opened Mozart's Don Giovanni over the weekend. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando takes us behind the scenes of the story inspired by the sexual exploits of the notorious Don Juan.
I think the thing that makes this particular production different is that the director has thought an awful lot about Don Giovanni's relationship to the society that he lived in, as well as to each one of the 5 or 6 other characters in the opera.
I think the story, the text, and the music all are very universal and very contemporary in their feeling. So part of the desire in terms of the set is to have something that's firmly embedded in the 18th century, but also can look quite contemporary and clean and minimalist, because I think the story is quite modern, and so is the music, really. The frame motif, which there are these framed pieces of art based on Goya, and there's one of David. And there's also a frame on the floor, and there's a frame that hangs in the air. Our meaning for this is the sort of constraints of the 18th century on Don Giovanni, who is a libertine who wants liberty to do whatever he wants to do, and these frames constrain him. I tend to emphasize the sort of act that Don Giovanni is putting on the image, the public image, as being very squeaky clean, almost religious and innocent and pure. That's his public image. His secret life is something entirely different.
You know, suddenly Don Giovanni is using his very high and noble state in life, in society, as a way to seduce women. And makes him even more dangerous, but I think also makes him more contemporary. I mean, we have in our own city a perfect example within the last couple of years of a person in high authority who was using that position to get women.
And then there is a breakdown where he, in the middle of the first act, where he decides that he's no longer going to put up that facade. He doesn't care if anybody knows what his secret life is. He's going to pursue that to the nth degree.
And then when the frames start to come up empty, they not only speak symbolically about the breaking away from the structures of church and civil society, but also of Don Giovanni's own emptiness inside.
I feel the piece is just as much about the people around Don Giovanni as it is about Don Giovanni. We tend to emphasize in this production more the other people's, not their culpability, but their sort of struggle with what Don Giovanni triggers in them, which are feelings that they themselves do not understand.
Giovanni is a fascinating character musically because he has to speak different languages in order to seduce different people. Giovanni is like a chameleon musically. He goes, you know, from one character to the other and speaks their language, and it's so seductive, they're just ready to go.
He's an exciting character because he does whatever he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. And that's very intoxicating and addictive and exciting. And I think these characters are exposed to that. It brings up all these feelings that they then don't know what to do with. So I think at the very end, they're all kind of lost without him. They were destroyed by him, but when he's not there anymore, they really have no means to get back to normal.
So I think one of the things that's really cool about doing Don Giovanni again is bringing back this music and letting us see it and hear it in a new production that says these things about Don Giovanni, that really shows us what kind of guy he is.
San Diego Opera's Don Giovanni has performances tonight and on the weekend at the Civic Theater downtown. A producer of an Oscar-nominated film is in town tonight. Lisa Bruce is also a graduate of Coronado High School. She'll speak after a screening of The Theory of Everything at the Village Theaters in Coronado. John Waters' cult comedy Polyester is more than 3 decades old, but KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando says it will assault your olfactory senses yet again as part of Film Out's monthly series tomorrow night.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Odorama.
It's been decades since San Diego audiences have had an opportunity to scratch and sniff an Odorama card along with a screening of John Waters' Polyester. But they're going to get a chance now. What is an Odorama card? Let me show you. This is a gimmick John Waters came up with for his film Polyester. All you do is watch the movie, When the number comes up, you scratch and sniff that number. So when number 1 comes up, scratch number 1, smell it. Ah, sweet smell of roses. Well, the rest of those numbers aren't quite so sweet, but you'll get a chance to smell them all when Film Outscreens Polyester.
In Odorama. You will experience some odors that may shock you. But the producers of this film believe that today's audiences are mature enough to accept the fact that some things in life just plain stink.
Polyester screens tomorrow night at 7 at Landmark's Hillcrest Cinemas. The weather, more seasonal, still on the slightly warm side right through the rest of the work week. 60s and 70s along the coast with some clouds and fog in the morning, then clearing back. A bit more sunshine expected for the inland valleys, temperatures in the 60s and 70s. Clear in the mountains, nighttime temperatures will be in the cool 40s in the mountains. And as for the desert, lots of sunshine, temperatures in the 80s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.